In this tutorial, we will have a look how we can create this enemy attack. As you can see, when we get too much close of this enemy game object, enemy is attacking, and once we get in attack range, enemy is chasing, and once we get too much close is attacking. So we're gonna use for this one, we will use a scriptable object, as well as we're gonna have a look how you can make a private field public. And before we jump into the coding part, or in this video, I want to specially thanks to Yusuf Saltabas. So I have this enemy game object, as you can see, and if I just click on this play button in the top, by now it's gonna play the combat idle animation clip right away. You can see in animator tab in the bottom, as you can see. So it's playing combat idle animation clip over again and again. So what we want to do, this enemy, once the player game object get in something in attack range, then this enemy should chase or should play the run animation clip. And once this enemy game object get too much close, then this enemy should play the attack animation clip, depending upon what player is doing. So let's get out of play mode. So we're gonna do that. In order to do it, if I select this enemy game object in the hierarchy, as you can see, I have attached a rigid body 2D component for the gravity, a box collider for collision detection, and we have an animator component which is responsible for playing our animation clip. So we need a reference of this animator component through our code, so we can switch up the animation through our code. So before we do, we need to make transition from this combat idle to run and attack. To do so, let's do it. So I'm gonna move this idle. I don't need the idle, so I can just press down delete, but I'm gonna leave it over here. So let's make transition from this combat idle to run. So in order to make it, so let's right click on combat idle and make transition to run, and select this transition or this arrow, and then go over to inspector, and we will untick this has exit time. Basically, as soon as possible, this if the player game object gets in attack range of this enemy, then this enemy should play the running animation clip right away. So that's why we just untick the has exit time, and we will set the transition duration to 0, because we don't want any duration or delay. And in the, if we scroll down, we can see we need to choose a condition, in which condition we want to play the running animation clip. So we're gonna set some certain condition or some certain parameter, and to do so, in animator tab in the left side, you can see that. So I'm gonna delete this one. So in we have layers and parameters, so just select the parameters and then hit this plus icon. So we will choose a bool parameter for this, and we can call this one something like in range. So let's call this range. Instead of in range, let's call it range. So we're gonna choose this condition, this range. If the range is true, then we're gonna play the running animation clip. So we need to choose this condition. To choose it, hit this plus icon in the inspector, and we're gonna choose this in range to true. And if the range parameter is true, it's gonna play the run animation clip right away. And we also need to make transition back to from this run to a combat idle. Once the player game object is far from this enemy game object, then this enemy game object should not chase our player game object. That means this enemy game object need to play the combat idle or the idle animation clip. So that's why. So let's right click on run and make transition back to combat idle, and we're gonna choose this transition and then move over to inspector. We're gonna untick this as exit time, as well as we're gonna set the transition duration to 0, and we need to choose the condition. So let's hit this plus icon, and we will choose a range parameter to false. And if we set it to false, basically uncheck, it's gonna play the combat idle animation clip right away. And to check it, if I just click on this play button in the top by now, and then manually set this parameter, basically this range parameter, to true or false, mean check or uncheck, you're gonna able to see. So if I just set this range parameter to true, means check, we can see indeed enemy just playing the running animation clip right away. And once I set this range parameter to false, as you can see it's playing the ideal animation clip by now. Why? Because we have chosen that condition. So if I just select this from this combat idle to run and then go over to inspector, we can see we have chosen that condition. So let's get out of play mode, and we also need to make transition from this run as well as from this idle to attack. Once the player is too much close, then this enemy should play the attack animation clip. So that's why. So I'm gonna drag this away, this animation clip, and let's select this attack, and let's right click from this run, as well as we're gonna make from this idle. So let's right click from this run, make transition to attack, or what you can do, we can just delete this one. No matter what state we are in, even we are running or combat idle, basically playing the idle, and suddenly this game object get close to this enemy game object, then this enemy game object should play the attack animation clip right away. So that's why we're gonna make from any state, from this run or combat idle. So we will right click on any state and make transition to attack, and let's select this arrow by now. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna select this arrow and then go over to inspector, and we will set this transition duration to 0, and we have to choose a condition, in which condition we want to play this attack animation clip. So we're gonna choose a trigger. To choose a trigger, in the left side in parameter, hit this plus icon, and in the bottom you can see the trigger. So choose it, and we can call this one to attack, and then we can choose this condition. So let's select this transition, go over to inspector, scroll down, and I hit this plus icon, and we're going to choose this attack. And from this attack we also need to make transition to run or combat idle, depending upon where the player is. If the player is something far away from our player game object, this enemy game object, then this enemy need to play this run or this combat idle, depending upon where the player is. So let's right click on make attack, and we're gonna make transition from this attack to run, as well as we will right click attack and make transition to combat idle. And what we will do now, we're gonna select this transition from this attack to run, and let's go over to inspector. We're gonna untick this as exit time, basically as soon as possible. If the player is not too much close our enemy game object, then this enemy game object should play the running animation clip right away whenever this player game object gets in attack range. And what we're gonna do from this attack to combat idle, so let's select this transition and then go over to inspector, and for this exit time we're gonna choose 1 basically means 100%. So we will play 100% animation clip of attack, and then we're gonna move over to this combat idle. So we're gonna set transition duration to 0, and we will we not gonna choose any condition. So the transition between this from this attack to run or attack to idle, it's gonna go automatically depending upon where the player is. And now if I just click on this play button in the top and then manually trigger this attack parameter, you will able to see the attack animation. This enemy just gonna play right away. To see that, let's trigger this attack parameter in animator. We can see indeed attack animation is playing. And if I set this range parameter to true, basically check, it's playing the running, and if we set this to false, it's playing the idle animation clip, which is the combat idle. So we need to set this parameter through our code depending upon where the player is. So let's get out of play mode. So what we have to do, we need to make a enemy script to do these things. To do so, let's go to project tab, then assets, and then create a script folder by right click, create a folder, and name that folder to something like script, and then head over to that script folder, right click, create C# script, and name it to something like enemy, and select the enemy game object in the hierarchy and select that enemy script. I have it over here already, so I'm gonna select that script and drag it over to add component section. As you can see, a plus icon just became. So what you have to do, you need to go over to overrides and then click on apply all. So the changes you made, basically you attach the enemy script in this enemy game object, so this script just gonna attach as well prefab of this enemy game object as well. So that is the thing. And now let's double click that script to open it up in Visual Studio. So I have a flip function over here. Basically this function to flip in the direction player is going, that is the thing. So we need to call the function, so I'm going to call it somewhere over here. You can ignore this one instead. And what we need to do, firstly we need the player position so we can check where the player is. For that we're gonna create scriptable objects. Basically scriptable objects are just like a data container. It's gonna hold the properties we can give to hold it. To create a script folder, what you have to do, you need to go to project tab, then assets, scripts, right click on a script, then create script and name it to something like enemy data. So I already have created a right over I have, so I'm gonna open that script by double clicking on it. And I'm gonna remove this start and update function, we don't need, so we can just remove this, as well as this mono behavior, because this script not gonna sit on an object, instead it's gonna derive from scriptable object. So we're gonna type scriptable object, and we can think over here what enemy game object needs. So first thing enemy game object needs is the player position, as well as the distance between them, or some kind of something you can call attack range, we can give, as well as the distance between, if it too much close, so this game objects need to stop, sorry, this enemy game object need to stop right there, and this enemy game object need to attack on our player game object. So we need those things. First thing is need our player position, so this enemy just can track of the where the player is. So we need player position. So let's go to script, and over here we can create a public transform, basically means position we can say, and we can call this one something like player position, or let's call it simply player. And also we need a range, we're gonna define a range, and if the player comes in range, then this enemy just gonna chase. And also we need a chase speed, so so this enemy just gonna chase our player game object with this much, with that much of speed or chase speed. So let's go there, and let's also give a public float, and we can call this something like attack range, to just check where if the player is come in attack range or not. And you can give a default value if you like, so I'm gonna give a default value something around 5 if. And also I'm gonna give you can call a speed, how much speed this enemy game object need to chase our player game object. So let's give it a public float, and we can call this one, sorry, float, we can call this one chase speed, and we can give it something around let's give it 3 unit, or let's give it 2.5, sorry, 2.5 if, and close that up with some my colon. And I'm also gonna give a retrieve distance, because once our enemy and this player game object is too much close, then this enemy need to stop right there, and it should play the attack animation clip, because player game object is now too much close. So that is the reason. So we're gonna give a public float, sorry, float, and let's call this one retrieve, sorry, retrieve distance. If I am just misspelling, I'm really apologize for it. And by default I'm gonna give 2.5 as well for this one, and control S to save your code. But we're gonna create so this script not gonna sit on an object, but we can use these properties to check our where the player is and what enemy game object need to do. So we need to create of this script. Basically we need to create object out of this script, and in order to create that, basically we're gonna create over here in project tab. If we move to project tab, then assets, then we're gonna right click and then create, we will see something like enemy data. So we can define a path where we need to create a object out of this scriptable object or this enemy data script or class. So we can define, so before we create the class, over here in the top of your class, make this a square bracket, and you can define the path where you want to create the object. So we can use this create asset menu, and as a first argument it's gonna take the file. Sorry, you can just give it a file name. So we can give a file name, and make sure you just do in quotation so you can define a path. So let's call this one something like enemy data, and also we can give a menu name, so comma menu name, and we will give in quotation something like enemy data, and we can also make a subfolder or a sub path. To make it, just make this slash and you can just define it what you want to name it. So let's call it data, and control S to save your code. Control S to save your code. And now if we move over to Unity, we can create the object right away in our assets by right clicking, and we have created the part as you can see. So we can go to file name enemy data, and then we can access the data, and this data what it's holding. So before we do that, let's go to project tab, assets, right click, create, and we can see indeed enemy data, and we created a subpath which is data as you can see. So just click on that. As you can see, it's just created right away. So we can call edata simply for enemy data, and if we select that and go over to inspector, we can see all of the field. We have player and it says none, and attack range we can define, chase speed as well as retrieve distance. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna select this player and drag it right there. Sorry, what we have to do, we need to drag this right there, but we can drag it, we cannot drag it over here. So what we can do, so if we just double click on this script, we can just remove this player if it's not holding. So let's remove this. We can do inside of that enemy script. So control S to save your code. I don't know why it's not happening, but you can just do it as well. You can just drag it from that prefab folder. And now what we have need to do, if we go to project tab, then assets, and then over here we need a reference of this e data or enemy data. So we can set this attack range and the chase speed we or the this enemy game object needs. So we need a reference of this e data, and e data what's it's holding, it's holding attack range, chase speed as well as retrieve distance. So let's go to enemy script now. So we will move over to enemy script. So we need a reference of this e data or of this game object you can say. So we will create a variable for that. So we're gonna make a serialized field. Sorry, before we make it, we're gonna make a private and that is a e data, or we just created a enemy data, a scriptable object. So we have to type of that and the name of the script or scriptable object script, and we can call it something like e data. So let's call it e data and close that up with semicolon. But this gonna be set to private, so we're not gonna able to see if we select this enemy game object in the hierarchy. So we're not gonna able to see underneath our enemy script that field, because that marked as a private. So what we can do, we can just type in square brackets serialized field. Even this field is private now, it's gonna be public. The only thing is that we cannot access this parameter or this variable through another class, but we can see this field underneath our enemy script. Why? Because we made it serialized field, and making serialized field makes our code lot more clean. So control S to save your code and then move over to Unity, and you're gonna get a hang of this scriptable object gradually. I'm gonna explain how you can get it. So just wait for to compile, and underneath enemy script, as you can see, e data fields appear, or the scriptable object that we're looking for, and the object we have it over here. So what we can do, we're gonna select that and let's drag it right there, and now we have the reference of this e data. Now we can access any field we want, this attack range, this chase speed as well as this retrieve distance. So now let's go over to enemy script, and we're gonna do over here. So first thing what we need our player position. So we're gonna make a variable for that. So let's make it somewhere around here. So I have it over here. So what you can do, you can make a private transform means position, and you can call this one player position or something like that, and make this one something serialized field. So you can see this field underneath your enemy script. So if we select this enemy game object in the hierarchy, you're gonna able to see the player field right over here, or the player transform. So what you have to do, you need to select this player and drag it right there, so you're gonna have the player position. So I already have it, so I'm gonna delete this. I have it over here, and I just grab it the reference in the start of the game. Basically I have the player position. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna go over here. I will check if we will use this vector2 dot distance function, and this distance function vector2, it's gonna take two position, and I'm gonna compare between them. So first thing, we're gonna pass our own position, which is transform dot position, means current position of our enemy or center position of our enemy game object, and comma second position we're looking for is player. So let's pass player dot position, and if the distance between our this basically player and this enemy, if it's lesser than or equal to that attack range, so we will go to edata script, and then we're gonna access the attack range. As you can see, we indeed, and make some curly brackets. So what we do, what we just doing, we're just checking the distance between our enemy and player if it's lesser than or equal to attack range. So basically we just moving over to enemy data class or this scriptable object, and then accessing this attack range, and by default as you can see we set 5. So if we move to enemy class, so this gonna right over here gonna be 5, but we can just change this to any number we like. If we go to Unity, we can just select this edata object and then go over to inspector. We can choose as a attack range whatever number we like. So I'm gonna leave it to 5, and you can change or choose over here as well. So what we're gonna, so this one just gonna be 5 right away. So if the distance between our enemy and player, if it's lesser than or equal to attack range or data attack range means 5, so what we have to do, then this enemy game object need to chase our player game object. So to in order to do, we're gonna set transform dot position, basically means current position of our enemy game object, and we will set the position equal to vector2 dot move towards, and this function right over here, it's gonna move our enemy game object. So first thing, it's gonna take the current position as a first argument. So let's pass transform dot position, and the second thing, it's gonna take the position where you want to go or want to target. So we will pass player dot position, and the third argument, it's gonna take the speed. So we will go to edata class, edata scriptable object class, and then we're gonna access the chase speed, and make sure you just multiply with time dot delta time to make frame rate independence. So let's multiply that, sorry, let's multiply time dot delta time and close that up with semicolon. So we just going over to edata, basically you can say this, just going over to this object and then accessing the chase speed, which is 2.5. so this right over here gonna be 2.5. so with this much of a speed we chasing, but before we chase we need to check the distance between our player and this enemy. If it too much close, then this enemy need to stop right there. So we will check one more time if in attack range as well as if the distance between. So we will check if vector2 dot distance, so first argument we're gonna pass transform dot position, means current position of our enemy or center, and comma we're gonna check as well player dot position. So if the distance between player and enemy, if it's greater than retrieve distance or some kind of distance, then we will chase. So we will go to edata, and then we're gonna access, which is our you can call retrieve distance. So and make curly brackets, and let's put the so if the distance between our enemy and player is still greater than this distance as a retrieve distance. So if we move to Unity, so basically we just going to this object and accessing this retrieve distance, which is 2.5. so this right over here gonna be 2.5. so if the distance between our enemy and player is greater than 2.5, or that retrieve distance, means the player is still not too much close. So in that situation we're gonna chase. So to chase, so we will put this line of code by Control X for cut and Control V for paste. But if the distance between is now basically too much close. So what player need sorry, what enemy game object need to do? And now if the distance between our player and enemy is now too much close, so in this situation this enemy need to attack on our player game object. So what we will do over here, we will type if the distance, else the distance between our player and enemy is now too much close. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna attack. So in order to attack, we need to trigger this attack parameter. So we can see, so we need a reference of this animator component. So if we select this enemy game object in the hierarchy and then go over to inspector, so we need a reference of this animator component so we can switch up the animation. So to do so, let's go to over here and let's make a serialized field private, private, and we can call that is animator component we're looking for. So let's type animator and we have to name it, let's call it animator. So basically we need animator, and make sure you just go to unity and drag the reference, basically take this animator and drag it right there, animator field, so you're gonna have the reference. And so if the distance between is now too much close, so we will go to animator and we will trigger this parameter. So we have to use this set trigger function, and this set trigger function gonna take the parameter name in quotation. So in quotation we're gonna pass attack, which is the parameter name, and make sure you just go to unity and check the parameter name which attack we can see. So and close that up with semicolon. But if we are chasing our player game object, then in that moment we need to play the running animation clip. So that's why we will go to animator, then set bool, sorry, we have to use this set bool function. Why set bool? Because this right over here, if we move to unity, this range parameter is a bool parameter. So that's why as a first argument it's gonna take the parameter name which is range. So let's pass range, and the second thing it's gonna take the value, so we're gonna set it to true, basically mean checked, and close that up with semicolon. But the distance between our enemy and player is still not lesser than or equal to attack range, means the player is far from this enemy game object. So in that moment this enemy need to play the combat ideal animation clip. So basically we have to uncheck this range parameter. So if we uncheck or set it to false, it will play the combat ideal animation clip right away. So let's go to script. So if the distance between, so else if the distance between our enemy and player is not a lesser than or equal to attack range, so we will go to animator, let's set the bool which we're looking for is range, and let's set it to false, comma, we will set it to false, and close that up with semicolon, control S to save your code. And now let's move over to unity. So just wait for to compile, and once it's done you will see that this enemy just gonna do the thing, and our script looks much better. As you can see animator and it says non animator. So what we have to do, we need to take this animator and let's drag it right there. Now we have the reference of it. So let's click on this play button in the top by now and let's have a look. Just wait for to compile, and if we just get closer in attack range, we can see enemy is attacking, and once it's close we can see enemy is attacking and enemy is looking, sorry, I don't know, it's not playing the animation clip over again and again. So what we have to do, we need to get out of play mode. From this any state we're going to choose this transition, let's select that and go over to inspector and click on this exit time, and if we just click in the bottom preview we can see that, and we're gonna choose right over here 0.5, let's leave it to 0.7. so if we just click on this play button in the top by now, we're gonna have a look on this and it will work out okay. And in the next tutorial we will have a look how we can damage our player game object. So if we can see indeed enemy is attacking, and once we get enemy we can see is, if we get closer we can see that enemy is attacking. So I hope you get the idea, and I'm gonna get out of play mode. So In the next tutorial we will cover up the how we can damage our player game object. So lastly, thanks for watching this video. I will see you in the next tutorial.